Okay, so that is recording. And then I'll start over with the sharing of the PowerPoint. Make sure that we're all back where we need to be. Here we go. So can everyone see the slides again? Okay, good. Thank you. So my name is Gayla Randall. I'm the OPI Family Consumer Science Specialist, work with the Career Technical and Adult Education team. I also come from another state where we worked on an initiative to promote a school-based center concept. It took us much longer to do than it has in Montana to partner with OPI and other agencies like 0 to 5, DPHHS, Department of Labor. In Montana, it's worked a lot more quickly. We had 3 models in the other state. One is that the school-based center, in all cases, the school-based center was based in the school building, but the actual directorship and running of the program, in one particular case, there was a partnership with the YMCA. In another one, it was school employees that were hired to be the director, and the FCS teacher was a assistant, if you will, in working with what we call the bigs, which are our high school students that were helping the littles. And then in the third model, the FCS teacher actually had early childhood credentials and actually ran the center, and then had a series of paraprofessionals that supported them in handling more of the teaching and work with the bigs, as well as the school related things like grading and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to point that out as we begin. I come with experience. It also was my major in college for 2.5 years. So I have a deep love of early childhood and all that means to not only parents and children, but also to the economy and our schools and communities and such. So I wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex to introduce herself. Then I have a few slides to set the stage, and then she has the rest of the day. So Alex, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gayla. I'm so happy to be here today and honored to be presenting to you all. I'm Alex DuBois. I'm the Policy and Engagement Director for 0 to 5 Montana. We're a nonpartisan early childhood policy and advocacy organization that serves the whole state of Montana. We really work to build partnerships and advocate for more robust access to affordable, high quality early education across the state. We also offer some programmatic services to childcare businesses, and 2 of my colleagues, Shelby Whalen and Jason Nitschke, have joined the call, and this is really a lot of their work, so I wanted to make sure they were on the call as well. And yeah, we all work together to build this toolkit, so we're excited to present it. I've been with the organization for a little over 2 years now. And before that, I worked in various roles, but started in a school-based childcare center. And it can be a really great model for communities. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Gayla.
We're very lucky to have you and your staff with us today. It was really a game changer when I met Alex and her staff, and moving forward this concept of having a toolkit to answer all the questions and make sure we were consistent in our guidance and messaging to the schools that were out there, and had a good reference that we could all attach ourselves to. So those of you that are attending and representing schools, if you'll make sure that you put your name and school name in the chat, that way I can capture it for your PDU points that I'll be providing all of you at the end of our Jumpstart series this August. Our contact information, of course, the name of the event is here on the first slide. I'm going to go over, like I said, a few slides to just talk about the industry in general, and then turn it over to Alex to talk about the toolkit and what it really means to start a school-based center. So the childcare industry itself is very interesting in the fact that it really is made up of providers that are really small business owners and agencies that work to support them. That really is what the industry is. There are some for-profit support systems, but for the most part, it's working with agencies that are helping support these providers and then helping them understand what it means to run a business. But the industry itself, as far as where the services take place, and care for children, is really three options. We have parent provided childcare, which we want to support also to make sure their needs are met, because we all know that parents are so vitally important to children, even if the children are in one of the other options, which is a child-based center, either family-based or a center-based, where they pay a professional not related to their children. But we all know that the child's most influential teacher is the parent. And I always want to start and include that in any conversation I ever have, because this is not looking at saying parents aren't important to children or that we shouldn't support them, because we really are. That's our number one concern is the parents that support the child, because we don't see them 24/7 when we're in the childcare industry. And so it's vitally important to do that. But I also want to mention that we've got to recognize that the United States, Montana really has some work to do. If you want to know a country that really has their act going on, if you will, their support is Denmark. And they really support parental and maternal maternity leave. They also have almost, well, 2/3 of a year that parents can take off to be with their child, because they know strong parent support of children is really the only thing that positively influences children in some of the other factors we know related to school readiness and mental wellness and all sorts of things. It's a really challenge to not have this kind of support in Montana in the United States. But we do what we can, and that's why we're all together here, is to see what we can provide for our community. Childcare is actually also has an economic factor, because parents don't have the choice to stay home a lot of times. They need to go to work to pay the bills and support their families. And it is an economic issue, and that's why the Department of Labor has been part of this conversation. They realize that there is not just the economy of child care and the individuals who are providing these services, bringing their wages into the workforce, if you will, but the parents that are not able to go to work, that want to, because they don't have quality care, is another facet. In some cases, people have mentioned that the industry itself for childcare is about $1.8 million across the United States, which doesn't sound like much. But if you consider the influence of the parents that are not able to work, that want to work, it is in the billions. So it really is something that we need to consider as the economic value, not only of the workforce itself, but also in the related to what the parents could bring if they knew they had quality care. So as far as some economics of the industry in Montana, this research was done by Child Care Business Connect, and it is accessed through the 0 to 5 website. I did provide you the source there. 70,000 parents are not participating in the workforce directly because they don't have quality care. We have 73,000 plus children ages 0 to 5. And of those, 22,000 don't have care. So we do have an issue. 60% of children have no access to quality early childhood child education programming. 60% of Montana counties have childcare deserts. That's less than 1/3 of demand is met. And then talks about some childcare costs. This is a maps. I know some of you've seen, because I've shared this with my FCS professionals several times, but this is the percentage of capacity of demand that is provided currently. And you can see no one is even close to 90 or 100%, which is why your work is so vitally important. This talks more about the labor statistics of how many are employed in the industry. And In Montana, I had a little blurb at the bottom of how many are in the workforce. And we really are, early childhood is the workforce behind the workforce. And FCS provides that link through the career and technical education programming. But sometimes doesn't receive the love because it's not have the highest, the economic factor financially is not as high as some other fields. They get more love than we do, but it's the workforce behind the workforce and has that secondary impact looking at parents and what they are not being able to do because they don't have quality care. So in Montana and FCS, there's a number of things we can do. We do have 2 pathways, education and training and human services, that both can embrace this. If you're looking at being a Perkins school and having access to Perkins funding, and there are some connections there I wanted to share. The school-based center concepts, there are lots of benefits. Their models exist in the nation, and we also have some models in Montana that are also already being successful. There are multiple funding streams that can be built upon one another to help support this kind of programming. It helps address the local needs without having to locate a physical structure if you're able to use the school building. In some communities, the school building is the most well-kept public building in the community. So knowing there's already a structure, knowing there's already support systems through cleaning services and administration and that sort of thing, it can be a built-in training center for our early childhood pathway students. So they can get that work experience and actually increase the ability of having more children if you have a strong program to meet some of the child adult ratios. If the student also meets some of the workforce regulations, which we'll get into a little bit today. And it does meet the need for teachers if the school looks at this as a way to recruit teachers who have small children and to provide care on site. There are some challenges as far as licensing. There's some remodeling that I'm sure will have to happen. There are some state applications. There's some advocating to do with your community. There's center director considerations, marketing to students to make sure they're interested. And then this is a long-term commitment to this concept. This isn't a, 1 year, 2 year thing. So those are some things that I know that Alex is going to address today. Oops, let me back up. So is there anything you want to add to that, Alex, before we move forward?
No, I think that's a great start with everything. There's pros and cons. But I think this is a great list. And there's probably more depending on each community. So thanks, Kayla.
Okay, great. Thank you. So today we have our training on going through the toolkit. And when I sent out the link for the Zoom call earlier this week, I did provide a link to this handout or this document. It is free. We're going to walk through it today and talk about the review process, some of the components, the considerations. And I did have school administrators that it was offered to them as a way to meet some of their questions as well. But I am recording it, so anyone that would like to take it and show it to your administrator or refer to it, please let me know. It's not a problem at all for me to share that with you. I do want to mention the CDA is a strong component of having a program, and it is the first stepping stone into the industry. The Child Development Associates, which is what CDA stands for, means your students can go right into the workforce upon completion. Or it's also beneficial if they get an associate's or a bachelor's degree, because it is the kind of credential that's recognized across the nation and also recognized in Montana. In the Jumpstart series, starting tomorrow and then ending next Tuesday, we have a 2-part session. And I do have the link there if anyone's like, oh, I meant to sign up for that, or now I see why maybe I should sign up for that. Part 1 was done in April as a pre-conference to the MAFCS conference in Lewistown. So if you attended that, you don't need to attend the August 2nd training. But then the second part, which is the first and only time it's actually being held, is in next Tuesday. And we're going to go over what is pre-apprenticeship, how to tie it to the CDA credential, talk about some program examples. We also have a speaker on the 6th from the Department of Labor who works with the early childhood pre-apprenticeship program to talk through what that means. to your school and your students. So it's definitely something that you might want to consider. If you can't attend in person, please register anyway. And then just note that to me, or I'll note if you're not on that you're wanting the recording, and I'll be able to send the recording to you. So with that said, then I'm going to turn over to Alex. Her contact information I'll have for you on the last slide when we conclude at the end. But I'm going to turn it over to Alex now. So for that reason, I'm going to stop sharing. See if anybody has any questions right now before we turn it over to her to start walking through the toolkit. Okay. Make sure again that you put your name and your school in the text box or the chat box so that I can capture that for your PDU points. But with that, Alex, take it away.
Thank you. And I do just want to pause for a second and would love if Jason could introduce himself because he didn't get a moment to do that, just so everybody knows who you are. That would be great.
Yes, hi everybody. Hi Gayla. Thanks Alex for the 8:58 invitation to join this 9 a.m. Presentation. My name is Jason Nitschke. I am the Senior Childcare Business Advisor with 0 to 5 Montana in the Childcare Business Connect program. Alex works a lot in the policy advocacy and ideation side of things. Shelby works with communities to develop needs assessments, gather data, identify facilities, and build community around this. And then I work with the programs that are actually spinning up and implementing the business model of childcare in a community. That's the high level stuff of what I do. And Pam, we can hear you now.
I wonder.
So I've been with 0 to 5 Montana since October of 2022. Sorry, I'm 11 days into dealing with COVID, so my brain isn't quite there yet. So I've been specializing as a business advisor in the early childhood industry for 2 years, but for the last 10 years, I've worked with businesses, including childcare businesses, on implementation of the challenges in this industry, and more broadly, what that means for Gayla, as you talked about the workforce behind the workforce, and our belief that childcare is fundamental infrastructure, no different than the food system, no different than transportation, education, and other economically important industries and services and communities. I will say that as you all consider school-based childcare solutions for your communities, for attracting and retaining talent with your school, be aware that there is a reason why some privately held for-profit entities are opposed to school-based childcare solutions, in part because it creates competition. And when offering free and reduced tuition to families, that can drive for-profit businesses out of the market. So I've actually helped a number of programs shutter who have seen increased competition with school-based programs. It's difficult for for-profits to compete with free services. So I would really encourage any community, those on the call now and those who may listen in the future, to find solutions to be collaborative with your for-profit competition, because it does create problems, and it is part of the reason why a lot of for-profit childcare operators are actually opposed to universal pre-K solutions. So that's a bit of background. My parents were both educators. My mother was out of the workforce for the first 2 years of my life. Of course, this was almost 50 years ago now. And then when she went back to work in 1977, she 100% of her wages went towards my care when I was very young. So this is not a new problem that communities and families are facing. It just happens to be the time that we're living in. But that's, I don't know what I'm going to talk about because Alex gave me 2 minutes to prep. So that's me pontificating on my own verbosity. So I'll stop now and chime in when relevant.
Thanks, Jason. As you can see, both my colleagues bring great expertise and we all work together for building strong communities. Okay, so today I'm just going to walk through our toolkit. I do want to say this was a group effort in building this toolkit. Staff at 0 to 5 Montana, Gayla and her team at OPI, Angie and her team at Raise Montana, and then Rhiannon at the Department of Labor and Industry. So we just had the pleasure with working with all of them and bringing this toolkit together. So I wanted to recognize them before we dove in. So I'll just go through the toolkit. And please feel free to pop questions in the chat, and Gayla can interrupt me. She said she'll monitor the chat for me, and we'll just have kind of a more informal presentation conversation with you all. So when building this toolkit, it really was apparent that we had to break it up into kind of these 3 phases that schools would go through if they wanted to explore supporting childcare. We started with the exploratory phase, where there's a lot of things to think through when it comes to childcare within a school system, because as Gayla said, there's various models and ways to go about this, and you can be pretty creative at the local level. And then we'll move into the planning phase, where we go a little bit deeper into, once you decide what the direction that you want to go, you can start thinking through some of those planning components of what will be needed. And then we offered kind of the operational planning, where it dives just a tiny bit deeper into like the actual operation of the program. So that's what we'll go over today. As Gayla kind of primed us with, as a state, we just don't have enough childcare to meet the demand. So this demand is really, this is showing the need for all children that are, and again, this is just under 6. And we still like aren't even considering the older children that need before or after school. This is the demand of children under 6 that have all available parents in the workforce. So whether that's a single mom that's going to work, or both parents that are going to work, this doesn't even consider families that may not be going to work, but may want their kid to engage in some sort of early education. So I always like to kind of caveat that from the beginning. So yes, as a state, we just don't have enough childcare to meet the demand. And then when we start talking about infants and toddlers, these numbers actually are even, kind of the percent is even less. Infants and toddlers are, from a business standpoint, not very viable, because you have lower teacher to child ratios. They have lots more equipment and materials that they need. And so a lot of our private small businesses have a hard time at making the case to be able to care for infants and toddlers. So that care is even harder to find. In Montana, we do have a childcare licensing system, which is through the Department of Health and Human Services, and we have various types of childcare. There's family childcare, group childcare, and then childcare centers. You can find all childcare providers using this childcare provider dashboard offered by the Department of Health and Human Services. And as Jason said, if this is something that your school is potentially considering, we would really encourage you to reach out to those childcare providers in your area and collaborate with them and work with them. And Shelby is happy to help you kind of make those connections if needed. Here's an explanation of the different types of licensed and registered childcare in our state. Again, this all depends on what type of childcare you'd want to offer in your school. Oftentimes we see schools offer group childcare, which is caring for up to 15 children, mixed ages. Or if they have more space, a childcare center would mimic what schools have where they're breaking children up by age. A center usually breaks classrooms up by age. So those are the two most common childcare setups that I see schools utilize. In centers, you can care for 16 or more children. We also wanted to lay out and explain the benefits of programs being licensed and registered. Number one, when you have a licensed or registered program, you have the basic kind of safety standards. So teachers are getting background checks. They need to be CPR first aid certified. They need to have some training. You can also utilize the Best Beginnings Childcare Scholarship, and that is just the state subsidy for helping families pay for childcare. Families that are low income qualify for that scholarship, and then the state pays directly to whoever the provider is for that child. If you're not licensed or registered in the state, you can't utilize the Best Beginning Scholarship. So those families that may qualify for it wouldn't be able to utilize it. And it can be a really big help for families that need that extra assistance. And additionally, teen parents that are going to high school, they also do qualify for the Best Beginnings Childcare Scholarship. So that would be another thing that I think would be pretty important for a school. The other thing that you can utilize is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. That really just helps cover some of the cost of nutritious foods for the program. The Stars to Quality program is a quality rating improvement program. So it helps childcare providers go through steps to improve the quality of care that they're offering. And sometimes there's some financial incentive for that too. And then, of course, last but not least, staff have the option to participate in a robust professional development network, and there is some financial incentives to go back to higher education and receive their degrees. So that's always a benefit. So laying kind of that baseline information, we really started with schools thinking through, does my school have the infrastructure to house a childcare program in or near the school? And then what business model will my school use to establish and run the childcare program? Those are like the first questions you're going to want to ask as a school. There's various types of business models that we've seen that are listed here. There's an outside contract. So some schools will contract with an existing childcare provider to be able to offer the services. And that could be the childcare provider opens another childcare center in the school system and really runs that as within the school system's structure. Similarly, the same kind of setup, however, being a nonprofit 501c3. School sponsored is really where the school takes on the childcare and is really involved in like all aspects of running the childcare program. I would say oftentimes this seems to be the most successful, as Gayla had kind of mentioned. The business of running a childcare is not very viable. So when a school system is able to support that childcare, they can often offer things like benefits to the employees that the childcare providers would normally not have. So there's some of those things to kind of think through. And then school partnered would be a like lower barrier model where a school contracts with another childcare provider and kind of purchases slots for their teachers, their own teachers, to be able to use those. I have yet to see one of those, and Jason and Shelby, correct me if I'm wrong, because oftentimes communities don't have the childcare facility to contract with, so and purchase those slots. So
Alex, I might add in there, if you don't mind, that
yeah.
when I've received phone calls or emails from schools, especially administrators that want to look into this model and how family consumer sciences can be involved, I just wanted to state up front that I'm more of a model where they have a center director separate, but that does not fall on the shoulders of the family consumer science teacher, whose really main job is to ensure the instruction of the youth that might be involved through either a pre-apprenticeship program or through aligning their child development courses through a dual credit or just high school credit programming. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that up front, that it's not a model where we consider that the FCS teacher would be the director as well as be teaching classes. Center director is very much a full-time job with licensing and reporting and all of the other things that they have to be responsible for. So I just wanted to share that right at the beginning here.
Yeah, 100%. The center director job is definitely a full-time job, going through everything. Some of these other questions that are pretty obvious, but always good to know, is just physical site considerations. What does your location have to offer for a program? And then what funding considerations do you have? It can be, depending on your resources, it can be expensive to start up a program. So that's just something that you'll want to kind of think through. And then, are you offering reduced rates to the teachers? Are you offering reduced or are you offering benefits to the childcare teachers? Like, all of these things, kind of start thinking about those funding items that are really important to the program. And then throughout this toolkit, I'm not going to go over them, but we do have some program spotlights of other programs in Montana, kind of early adopters of having childcare in their school system, and some of the challenges and some of the successes that they've had. So I'll just kind of breeze. Sorry if I make you sick from scrolling. So next consideration is staffing. Licensed and registered programs do have specific staffing, and it depends on what program your school wants to offer. So you'd have to kind of gauge that. But so if it's a center where there's age-specific classrooms, it would be like 1 to 4 with infants, 1 to 6 or 8 for toddlers, and then go up. Or if you had a group program, that would be essentially 2 teachers to up to 15 kiddos of mixed age. And there's some nuances in there, but that's kind of the general lay of the land. So that's something to think about. And then childcare business considerations. Jason, if you want to just give kind of an overview of that, this was really your contribution. So that would be great to just talk through some considerations as a school.
Well, Alex, since I haven't read this in a while, since I wrote it, excuse me. Yeah, there's a lot of various things to consider, including as I work with programs of all types, on their kind of financial approach to this, because every idea that you may have for putting a program on site, near site, or in collaboration, there's a financial implication. So, for example, we talked about it, the staffing pattern of the program needs to take into account the day-to-day operation, the delivery of care, and the delivery of educational services to the kids in the classroom. But as we mentioned here as well, we also have to address the administration obligations. So even if your program is going to be a group program with a maximum of 15 kids in that program, the teacher to student ratio requirement is 2. But let's just run through the administrative burden. Who does things like cooking? Who does things like all of the things that don't require someone to be in the classroom, keeping things clean? The operational component of this also has to take into account the reality of what I am dealing with right now, which is illness. What happens when somebody's sick? What happens when somebody needs to go to the bathroom? When you look at this from the through the lens of risk management and insurance, you know, the average payout for a child being left unattended for 1 minute, 2 minutes, we're talking about multiple thousands of dollars. We're looking at an average payout for an unattended child for 1 minute, so somebody can go to the bathroom, is in the mid 20,000s. That's your average insurance payout. So we have to account for things like floaters, overlap care, what happens when one of your 2 core teachers gets sick, and those types of considerations. Comprehensive budgeting is extremely important. And yet, what do we see? The reason Shelby and I have jobs is because these are considerations that people skip over every single day, which leads to things like closure of programs when one or 2 teachers is ill, or has an illness in their family, or so on and so forth. So a lot of different things to consider when it comes to that. So it does really truly require a comprehensive budget that is not 5 items in a cost structure, but is thinking about things like loss, theft, waste, and unknowns, and how much more it's going to cost to run a program in reality on the ground. So it really is important to think about your program design from the perspective of total revenue, total costs, and these unknown things that we just don't really think about. Even programs that are dealing or have been operational for years and years, they still skip over some of these things. So I guess maybe, Alex, that touches on a few of the things that are in this that we tried to address comprehensively.
Yeah, and again, if you don't mind, Jason, I might add in there some of the models that I've seen as far as food preparation, not having to do food preparation right in the center itself, having more like a kitchenette for cleanup and for maybe small preparation, like slicing an apple or something. But there have been some situations where family consumer science programs have a culinary program. And their culinary program is the group that actually works with the early childhood teacher. And sometimes that's the same FCS person to plan snacks and meals and have the culinary program actually in their food safe space, make the food for the children. And in some other cases, the school lunch program they've been utilized to do something that's similar to what the rest of the school is eating for the littles, because they're in the same building. So there are some ways to structure the food preparation piece if you don't have a staff member that actually has that responsibility. That's part of the center. And I'm always willing to share some of those models and have you contact some people I know that are doing that sort of thing. But thank you.
Yeah, and Dale,
Yeah,
I would add, sorry, Alex, I would add, this is one of the benefits of having a childcare program on site, because in a lot of instances that I have seen, that we've seen, the employees are employees of the district. Um, Pam, since you're on, Baker is having this type of a conversation right now, and it's not Baker's project is not a school-based project, but their facility is going to be owned by the Economic Development Organization. So these people are going to be public or quasi-public employees, which then opens up the option for things like health benefits, retirement benefits, and other ancillary benefits that really do attract and retain workers to the program. And in the industry in Montana, we're looking at an annual average turnover rate for childcare workers in Montana between 50 and 60% annually. So not only are we not getting enough workers into the career path, we're not keeping them. Well, it begs the question, why? Well, when you can't realistically, you can love kids all you want, but if you can't cover the cost of your living your life as an ECE teacher, realistically, that you can go get a corporate retail job and probably make more money doing this work. Which that's a difficult decision for people to make. But when we live in a hyperinflation environment, which we have for the last 18 months, people have to make those types of decisions, or they simply subtract from the workforce, which Alex was referencing earlier, and they live off government subsidies of other kinds. So we really do need to attract and retain workers with, number one, meaningful and significant competitive wages, really truly competing with the benefits packages, and then creating workforce environments where people want to actually come to work. And this is where the argument that, well, let's decrease ratios and maybe that will increase financial profitability and viability of the business model. I don't know about you all, but I could barely handle one baby by myself, let alone 3 or 4, or decreasing ratios up to 6. That's just not a way for us to keep employees and teachers to care for the kids.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pop in really quickly because I do feel like this next section around assessment ties into all of these financial implications that schools need to consider. But I've worked with businesses before that are exploring childcare solutions for their staff or even for their clients, and they throw together a facility that they imagine being the solution for their challenges, without actually identifying what the need there is. And so not only have they wasted time and money and resources on this solution that doesn't actually fit the need for their schools, but they're not even solving their original issue. So now they're going all the way back. So I just wanted to shout out that this next section is really, really crucial to financial viability of the business as well, so that when you put in place this solution, it doesn't immediately close because of a lack of utilization or setup.
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. This is one of our favorite sections to highlight because it's one of the most important sections and one of the most common sections to skip over. And it's really collecting the data on what care is needed. Oftentimes we'll hear we need evening care and we need weekend care, and that could be true, but if you don't actually collect the data on what the school employees or the community members, whoever you want to serve with your program, you don't actually know what the care is. So we do have a sample needs assessment we have tons of resources at the end of the toolkit, but we have a sample kind of survey at the end that can be utilized to help get that data. So after you know what care is needed and you think through all of those things, then you'll want to go into the planning phase. And again, this business planning is a really key component, and often overlooked. This is where you can contact Jason or reach out to all the wonderful, utilize all the wonderful resources that exist. And then we've kind of broken it up into, depending on the business kind of model that you choose, some more specific recommendations based on that. So outside contract model, here's some things you're going to want to think about: an MOU or a contract, both parties are there, all of those sorts of things. School sponsored is a little bit different. And then here's my note here too. It's noteworthy to mention the primary work of licensed family and consumer sciences teacher is to oversee the industry and workplace experience of the high school CTE students. So this is just really calling out that there is a difference between that family and consumer sciences teacher and what a program or a childcare director's responsibilities are. Skip over. Okay, close your eyes if you're going to get nauseous. Location is a huge thing too. So I often hear that schools struggle with having space for childcare centers. And there's also, we've also heard, like, within the community, there's issues with childcare space. So this is something you're just going to really want to think through, and also recognize that the childcare licensing system does have facility specific requirements, just as a school does, but they're definitely more regulated than a school. So that's something where having the conversations with those childcare licensors is really important. And they are great resources. They can come out and say, oh yeah, you just need to do this, or you'll need this. And they can be a really great resource for that.
Alex, do you mind if I step in and just
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
something on suitable locations? Really early in any project, as it relates to where you're proposing to do something. Now, I would make the assumption that every every school is going to be zoned by its local jurisdiction as having childcare as an eligible use of that space in that local community zone. I would urge you to not make that assumption. I would encourage you to engage directly with your local jurisdiction's planning and zoning department professionals to ask that question. And if it's, especially if it might even be right across the street in an offsite facility. We've seen multiple kind of order of priority things taken out of order, and people spend time, effort, energy, and resources building out a facility only to then find out they're actually not zoned appropriately and cannot do what they're proposing. Up to and including, just as an example, saying I'm going to put a center-based program into pick a facility when that would require a conditional use permit, and that's 16 plus children in a space is not permitted, and it requires an additional zoning procedure. And so that really does need to be among the very first exercises, contacting local zoning professionals with your jurisdiction. And just because one community, I'll use my community as an example, I live in Great Falls, just because Great Falls is zoning definitions for certain facility usage says one thing, does not mean that a community right up the road has the same definitions for these different types of things. City of Butte, Alex, where you and Shelby are both located, there isn't a single zoning in the city of Butte that has childcare as a permitted use. So that's an additional procedure, additional time that and an additional cost that you will need to go through. So don't skip over that part. It can save you a lot of time. It can save you, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars as well.
Yeah, zoning is quite an interesting component, that's for sure. Okay, digging a little bit deeper into staffing, we've listed some great resources for staff. These are kind of program director and program staff qualification requirements. That's really helpful to kind of help you think through staffing and what the qualifications are. And as I had kind of alluded before, just as public schools have, childcare providers and early educators also have professional development requirements. And so this is some more information about that system and how to make sure that you're plugged in there. And then I did want to highlight too, both this is where OPI can kind of come in with family and consumer science education. There's some more information, and I think Gayla will talk a little bit more later. And then also you'll hear from Rhiannon in a couple days. Is that correct, Gayla? On the, or is that later today? Couple days, yeah.
Yeah, that's on Tuesday, the 6th. That's
Tuesday.
part of the part 2
About the
CDA training. She's
yeah,
going to talk about the pre-apprenticeship.
yeah, the pre-apprenticeship, which is like amazing and a really great way to kind of think through that workforce component. It is top of the hour. Do we want to take a little break or do we want to keep going? What do you prefer, Gayla?
I'm going to leave that up to the attendees. Do you want to take a short break, or do you want to push through and then maybe end a little early? Someone unmute, tell me what you want to do.
I vote keep going.
Keep going. Okay. Everybody fine with that? Okay.
Great.
I don't hear anything negative the other way. So let's go ahead.
Sounds good. Thanks. Okay, moving in to the operational planning. Although our organization doesn't work a lot in the like curriculum and quality practices and classroom practices, we still want to promote high quality childcare and early education. So we did want to make sure to add that into the operational planning phase and just make sure that anybody using this toolkit had the resources that they needed to think through how they're going to offer the care to the kiddos when they're in the classroom. Linked is Montana actually has preschool program guidelines, really focused on the care of 3 to 5-year-olds. And then we also have the Montana Early Learning Standards, which is an excellent resource. And I think it's actually getting revised right now, so we'll even have a more updated version. But as a new teacher, this is something that I really utilized, and it helped me think through the education that I was offering to my little ones, all the way from, you know, infants all the way up to kind of my preschool age kids. So that's a really great resource, and these are, of course, all free. And then I did want to highlight our state has currently 6 childcare resource and referral agencies. And in those agencies, there is great expertise around providing quality care and what our current kind of childcare landscape looks like. So they're a great resource as well. And of course, last but not least, Head Start is an excellent model. It's very comprehensive and very high quality, and they have a gamut of resources that are free for anybody to utilize. So we always want to offer them as a resource as well.
Alex, while you're scrolling, can I tell a quick anecdote as it
Yes,
relates
please do.
to early learning standards and zoning as they come together? Depending on who you're talking to and you know, understanding your audience and what you're trying to accomplish, it may be necessary for you to say the words, "We're creating uh, an early child care education program." What some people might hear is we are going to become babysitters. And depending on who you're speaking with, they may not recognize um, the educational components for kids age 0 to 5 and so on. So a quick example in Toole County, one of Shelby's projects that she and I have collaborated on is spinning out two separate childcare programs, one of which just went through a conditional use permitting process in which their initial application for occupancy in a specific facility was denied, and yet the zoning code specifically calls out schools as being eligible to be operational in that specific building. So what we had to do is write a letter of support for the conditional use permitting process, pointing out that early educators are educators, just like K-12 and higher ed, because depending on who you're talking to, they may not see childcare businesses program, you know, even a school-based childcare program as an educational program. So just kind of an anecdote there. We were successful in getting that conditional use permit pushed through and approved, which was really great. But it took extra steps, and we had to change how people think about this industry and the work that's being done in it.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's a great example. Um, It's interesting because the childcare industry is a relatively new industry when we talk about industries, and there's lots of assumptions that it's kind of a babysitting, um, drop off, watch TV situation. And we're really hoping to continue to encourage, that educational component and how important early education is and how great it is for kiddos. So curriculum, you guys are very aware of what curriculum is, but there is great options out there for young kiddos. But I just wanted to list out a few of the things to consider as you may be looking at curriculum choices for your little ones.
So I have a side note, Alex, if I could
Yeah.
mention it too. On page 19, you just mentioned that there's the Montana Early Learning Standards.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be standards for working on outcomes for the littles. Family Consumer Sciences has national standards as a discipline, and our national standards are outcomes for the students. So I wanted to have our FCS teachers realize when you're doing your work and bringing this content to your students in their classroom, you'd use the National Family Consumer Science Standards. But if your students are writing lesson plans or curricula to use with the littles in your school, your students would be using the Montana Early Learning Standards. So it's still standard-based. So those of you who have that regulation or that requirement or that guidance at your school that what you do is based in standards, this is how the standards, you're utilizing two different groups of standards in two ways. So I just wanted to be clear because I'm not sure from the FCS point of view if that really comes across. So thanks for letting me add that.
Yeah, please
Al-
do.
Alex, can I add on what Gayla just referenced?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
some of the research that we've done, the surveys and interviews that we've done with people within the industry, some of the feedback that they've told us, we're talking about the educators and the business owners, they've articulated to us a sense that their career path is not professional in the eyes of others. And I think, Gayla, what you just referenced is extremely important when it comes to attracting and retaining workers, helping to articulate and communicate to those future teachers that this is a highly professional and meaningful and impactful career. And when you can clearly show what their academic achievements are designed to do, and then pair that with the outcomes of how they impact the lives of kids. I'll use just another anecdote. In my daughter's 10, she's going into 5th grade. She went to a star level 4 facility here in Great Falls, and her kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 4th grade teachers have all said to me how clearly obvious it is that my child went to a high quality program because she's substantially more academically advanced than peers who didn't. And Alex can probably talk about the data that supports this and probably cite that data better than I can. But the challenge that the providers have articulated to us is they themselves and the perception of their career path from others is not seen as a career professional enough. And so I think, Gayla, what you're referring to, really important so that we can attract people to the industry because of the professionalism and the career pathway that the industry and the career option is.
Yeah, Jason, I totally agree. And I think part of that work is delineating the purpose and the desired outcomes or expected outcomes of babysitting versus a childcare center versus a preschool program versus, so forth, so that individuals can start to understand professionalism. Nursing had the same issue about 15, 20 years ago, and they came up with a scaffolding of credentials as well as how they're all related to each other, and that helped build their credential and their understanding of being professional. So I think we have some of that work. I know Alex can attest is what we're planning to continue to do is our collaborative within early childhood. But thank you for bringing that up, Jason.
And the next challenge is to get compensation for these professionals at the same level as K-12 educators, because that is the fundamental challenge of the business model, is to bring in enough money to pay high enough wages and benefits so that we can keep the people in the industry. And what we're seeing is people leaving early childhood to go to K-12 or to some other industry because of the compensation benefits options for them.
Yeah, we have a lot to do in all of our educators' compensation. Thank you for that. And yeah, please jump in, both of you, and anyone else too, as we're going through this. Yeah, so back to the toolkit, we also wanted to offer our philosophies resource. There's various childcare philosophy models that oftentimes are kind of not thought about too. So there's multiple options that you can utilize. There's some great longstanding research and evidence on various philosophies that you can think through. And that really, again, all whatever meets the unique need of your program. And then last but not least, we also did really want to highlight kind of building off of that sentiment of maybe early educators not being looked at as professionals or as professional as school teachers. Really making sure that schools and the early education program build a strong relationship. And whatever that looks like, I know it can feel really great for early educators if they're in a school system because it does feel and appear outwardly to be a little more professional. So ways to bring that program into the more professional setting is really important, and having a really good relationship between those, whatever your kind of model looks like. Let's skip over these. So in the appendix, oh, go ahead, Gayla, were you going to talk?
No, I was getting ready for when you got to the FCS
Okay.
pages. I was just gonna say the appendix provide additional information that is really well read, written out. So it's easy to read and could easily be a handout if you needed it in your school system to share certain concepts.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm just gonna go through the appendix because, like Gayla said, this is all really important content, and we just wanted to make sure everybody had this information. This speaks about our Montana Childcare Business Connect program, which I've highlighted the kind of two Jason's business advising. Shelby really helps work with communities to come together. We also offer peer mentorship, so kind of a business accelerator program. We offer trainings that are really business specific. And then we also have our resource center that kind of houses most of our all of our resources. And I'll make sure to share the link, or maybe Shelby can pop it in the chat. So that's kind of a nutshell of some of the services we offer. And then thinking more holistically, we're also a place that, like on my team, if you see areas of advocacy, we're always open to a conversation on that. And these are the childcare resource and referral agencies that I was speaking about in the regions that they do service. I will say childcare resource and referral agencies are contracted to provide services for the Department of Health and Human Services, and their contracts are re-up right now. I don't know how to say it, like re-up right now. And the DPHHS has changed the contracting a little bit. So most likely there will be a change in what the childcare resource and referral agencies look like. We will make sure to update the toolkit once we know that. We won't probably know that till fall. But just keep that in mind as you're utilizing this information.
Alex, can you what link did you want me to plug in?
Oh, just the Business Connect resource. Thank you. And then this is some more information about, I kind of mentioned the childcare licensing program, or the childcare licensing, and Raise Montana. They're excellent resources. Highly recommend connecting with your local childcare licensing individual. They can be located on that website right there, and they just help think through the health and safety components and do monitoring. And you'll hear a little bit more, like Gayla had mentioned, about the apprenticeship opportunities more in depth on Tuesday. But we did want to make sure to have those in the toolkit. There is both the Pre-Apprentice Child Development Associate program, and that's actually a pilot program, but it's been really, really successful. And there is also the Montana Early Childhood Apprenticeship program that is through the Early Childhood Project. So both of those are kind of workforce opportunities that exist in our infrastructure.
And
And then I'll-
appendix,
Go ahead. Yeah.
okay, Appendix C is all about some of the things you might want to consider as family consumer sciences programs that want to be part of a school-based center, or even if you want to be linking with and utilizing as a workplace another center that's close to the school or in your community. I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but I want you to note that there are some things that Jason had mentioned as far as some support, some foundational work that needs to take place to support a center. If you look on the first page or page 27 right there that we have in front of you under work-based learning, there's some opportunities for your students if they're in more of an introductory course, some of the things they could do to provide some of that foundational support, the technical experiences, and then of course the work-based learning where the students are there more full-time working with those particular students. So you want to look at that. Also on 28, it talks about the benefits of being part of an approved family consumer science program and Perkins eligible because of the funding streams that can be pulled in to support your work, but some of that can also be used to support the center. Carl Perkins does allow some equipment purchasing. It allows some resource purchasing. The Montana CTE funding is our state VOED money, and that's based on enrollment. So that could potentially, if you are able to talk to your administrator and I'm able to help you understand what type of income you received from your enrollment and see if that could be allocated to you and your program to support some of the things that you need as well. I did write down that OPI has the support through having my position here to support you and to be your liaison in some of these collaboratives and provide some guidance for you or access to some resources like this, set up some PD for you. So don't hesitate to reach out. It's provided to you as part of the service of OPI. And I have the contact information there at the bottom of the page. You don't see my name in particular, but the reason is we're trying to make this more of a universal document over time. But anyone that's in my position in the future would offer that same support. So this is the piece that you might be able to look at your programming or talk to your administrators when they're like, well, what is it exactly you can do in this work? This can guide that. And so it was kind of created as a 2-page handout, if you will, for administrators or your CT curriculum directors or whoever you might have. So you can read the rest of it on your own. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so great to see how these can work together, and it's just like such low-hanging fruit almost in our eyes. So yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Gayla a question, and I'm trying to anticipate questions that administrators or folks looking at doing school-based programs might ask. The CTE funding and Perkins funding, the way I understand it, so this is what I'm asking. This funding is primarily to support the startup costs to get programs online, and some of the training for the students in the program, not the children being served, but it's not to fund the operation of the business. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's there's one big requirement, and you have to have a family consumer sciences approved program. And so you have to have a licensed family consumer science teacher that offers at least 2 courses. And to be Perkins eligible, which is what I promote, you have to have those courses be related to a particular pathway. So it'll have to be education or human services driven. And also they require 2 full years or 4 courses within the pathway that's offered to students over their 4 years in the high school setting in order to access those funds. But it's mainly to support the FCS teacher. But since the FCS program would be tied to the school-based center, your students would need to have access to equipment, toys, reading materials, children's books, play-related things that they could be utilized in the FCS classroom. Those easily could be stored within the center. And that's where they're actually utilizing those materials, is within the center as part of a work-based learning type experience. It is a sequence of courses and experience students have. You really would not want to take a first semester student in a child development class and expect them to be successful. All the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up about what I'm about to say, thinking they could actually do workplace experience and be under the guide of a center director or teacher and know that they have the skill set needed to interact with students in a positive manner, that they know what it takes to be a provider, because we all have our default of what we witnessed or what we witnessed in our families with children, and that may or may not be positive experience. So it's a sequence of experiences, but that the limitation really for the center is what the high school students would be utilizing in building their skill set to be the next round of teachers and professionals in early childhood. So the center itself, some of the initial creation of the center, purchasing some things could fit under Perkins allowances. But as far as building the center itself, even some of the remodeling potentially could be covered depending on what it is, if it's part of if it's a school building owned by the school. And it's kind of a case by case, and they always pull me in. And since I have experience in another state, that's actually one of the reasons I was hired, is to bring that experience here to Montana when we're looking at the early childhood related experiences with center-based programs. Does that answer your question, Jason?
It does. And the reason, and thank you for the clarification. The reason I bring that up is because one of the most frequently asked, if not the most frequently asked question that Shelby, Alex, and other members of our team get is, where is the grant money, the free money to help me run my business? And so I'm glad you were able, this is why I asked, to clarify the difference between what this money is and what it's not. This business model, the business model of childcare, for some reason has required people to ask where is the money for me to run my business? And that does relate to operating cash flow positive, even in a school-based situation. I wanted you to articulate the clarification that what this is and what it's not. Thank you.
Well, I think the biggest way that could be helpful from running the business is if you have a strong FCS program with a licensed FCS teacher who is able to build this sequence of coursework and support for their students. So by the time they are the end of the second year, or maybe even a third year student that does the work-based learning experience, if they meet the qualifications as set by the state of a childcare worker, which in some cases will mean fingerprinting and all of the other inoculations and things, they could be hired, if you will, to be a center worker to offset the ratio. But it would be that student who's been successful. And in my estimation, they should also be a student that's working heavily in the CDA, because the CDA requires a lot of guidance on relevance and rigor. That would lead the student to understand exactly what the responsibilities are that they'll have by being in that workforce situation. So that could help with the underlying costs. If you could go from a 2-center person to a 3-center or 4-center person, where 2 of those students are actually seniors in high school that work half days, say, for example, in the childcare center, because they're earning their CDA work hours. They're going to get credit as part of their workplace experience course if it's coded to the right courses, which that's part of my job, is to make sure teachers know what codes to use. But then also could offset the cost of having to pay someone. But the development of the center I want to share with my FCS teachers, it's just like if your industrial tech program decided they were going to do automotive and they put in a room or a wing that they actually provided services on people's cars. If your early childhood center was based as part of the Family Consumer Science program, which the 3 models we had in the state that I came from had, those programs were part of the Family Consumer Science part of the building. And so therefore the space itself was considered a school building classroom, and was then housed and cleaned and everything by the school staff. And so that would help an underlying cost of running a program too. So it's just a matter of checking the boxes and playing the game, if you will, to have access more to the school-based thing. In all three models that I had mentioned, the employment was actually through the school building. They were school employees, so that helped with the benefits and things as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. That they were employees of the school and can be really helpful, and that space too, because rent is very high right now, or mortgages. So rounding us out, here's the example of childcare needs assessment that can be given to employees, community members, again, whoever the program wants to serve. I think a very common way to offer care is teachers within the school have priority, and then additional spaces kind of opened up from like general community members. So that's pretty common. But again, schools are obviously welcome to do whatever they want. And then we did offer a MOU outline just to help schools if they're kind of contracting with childcare program, and then all of our references at the bottom. So that concludes our toolkit. I think it would be great if anybody has any questions while we're on, or thoughts, or yeah, I'd love to just open it up.
Alex, while people are thinking, I want to advocate for Shelby's work as it relates to that needs assessment questionnaire. I think Shelby can speak more specifically to this, but when you're asking the questions of your community and your staff and so on, it's really important to get the right questions answered. That actually can save a lot of time and set direction in such a way that you're building something that people actually want, not what you think that they want. And Shelby has spent a lot of time, I think, right, Shelby, trying to unpack or analyze bad question design, need assessment design. And so what we say, garbage in, garbage out, start with a really solid assessment questionnaire.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about making life easier for people, so that's why we have the templates that are built out the way they are. Adding and editing questions for your community specific needs is completely necessary in a lot of situations. However, like, you don't have to do all of that alone. I have a degree in psychology. I've done a lot of data, both in this role and in like previous roles. And so I am happy to sit down with anybody to really walk through each question and make sure that the question that you're asking is actually going to be retrieving the information that you're looking for. But yeah, just to Jason's point and what I spoke on a little bit earlier in the call, data is huge in being a driver for making sure the solutions that you're bringing forth are actually going to be solving the issue. So it's really key. And yeah, my technical assistance around this work is free and open. You can find my contact information in the link that I plugged into the chat, along with Jason's contact information. But we're always welcome to open up our calendars, find time to meet with community members, and really just sit down and tailor whatever is necessary to your guys' situation.
Wonderful. Can you all see the slide deck again? Okay, I do want to revisit this slide because I know some of the questions my family consumer science teachers are probably going to be, okay, well, if I'm involved in training students to get them prepared to work in a center, what does that mean? And so I do want to suggest that you sign up for, if you haven't already, the Jumpstart series starting tomorrow, which is the CDA training part 1, and then next Tuesday is part 2 for August 6th. And the reason that we have those split apart like that is there is some homework, if you will, to do to start to make some decisions from a content or course offering level that you would bring to the second part. When I walk through the content, it makes sense to align our content regardless if you offer the CDA, to align it to what the CDA is asking, because it is based in best practice and what content we really should be training our students in to get them prepared for this workforce. It's also information that will be very valuable to them as future parents as well. So I think that's another way to sell it to your students. Even if they're not interested in the industry, they might in the future. Who knows what'll happen when their own children come along, or when there's a need in the family potentially for some care. It will set the rigor of what quality means. But we'll also then talk about the pre-apprenticeship program, which is something your students could qualify for that have some need requirements, but the pre-apprenticeship will offer some funding for your students then to support their work going on to get their CDA and potentially to get a 2-year degree to go into the profession free of charge, if you will. They offer some special supports for those centers that these pre-apprenticeship students would be working in to get their work hours in. And they do require that the center is licensed. So if a high school program is a licensed early childhood program, now you've got the trifecta. You've got the student who's in a pre-apprenticeship program. You've got the licensed FCS teacher providing quality instruction for them and overseeing their work-based learning experience. And then you're going to get the free college credit costs covered for them also to continue their education. So if you haven't signed up, the link QR code is there. You can sign up. Again, all this is free. Even if you can't attend, please register, and those that don't attend, I will send the link to, so you'll have that to refer to. The other thing that I wanted to mention as we review what Alex and her staff, which thank you so much for being here today, have mentioned, is this school-based toolkit has a lot of recent information you as an FCS teacher could utilize as teaching material. So even if you don't have a school-based center, you could still access some of the content related to business startup, and what are some of the things your students could explore to actually find a facility, and how they would plan a facility if they were going to run their own childcare center. So you can use it as your own reference to understand what it means to have an industry and run a center, but then also utilize it for your students as teaching materials. I wanted to share that as well. The early learning standards that she mentioned could easily be utilized when your students are doing any type of project. And I also am going to talk about some possible assessment of skill set that when in the CDA training, the part 2 on Tuesday. So even if you want to do part 2 and you don't want to do part 1, that's perfectly fine. But one of the things we're going to talk about is family consumer sciences tied to FCCLA, and how that student organization, the CTSO, has a number of competitive events that align directly with early childhood that you could utilize as well when you're doing your instruction, but also link them to preparation to be in a workplace experience. So you might want to think about attending that. Again, all of these sessions are 2 hours in length or less. They're pretty close to 2 hours, but we do want to leave a lot of time for questions. But if we don't have questions, then of course we end the instruction. That's really the last things that I wanted to share. Oh, I know one thing. When you're planning your instruction for your students to work with the littles, it does make sense to not only identify the national FCS standard that you're addressing when you're having to do that in your lesson plans, but where appropriate do identify also where in the Montana early learning standards, how you're aligned to that as well. And that can also help delineate for your administration when you say, we need to spend a full day visiting a childcare center or Head Start or something, even if it's in another community. If you're able to link that to the early learning standards and how that's part of your family consumer science standards, then that might be another way to justify being able to utilize the funding to take your kids on that type of a field trip. But I'm here if you have any questions about, I'm not quite sure, I'm struggling with how this is put together, please let me know. I taught for 20 years. I didn't say that at the beginning. Family consumer sciences in every school I taught at. I had a strong early childhood program. And I actually had some dual credit courses, my last school that I taught that earned community college credit. And that was before we really had that sort of thing. We were the first ones out of the gate at their community college to get students to try to go into the profession. This profession also is very good when you're talking about students and why they should take an early childhood class. If you have any students interested in pediatrics or in child psychology or in anything that they might work with children, pediatric nurse, occupational therapists for children. I mean, there's still, if our high school students can understand learning about children is benefiting them personally, but also a lot of careers, we can then maybe subliminally get them to think about early childhood as a profession, even if they maybe don't come to you with those thoughts originally. And I think it would be really good for a collaborative. This is put in our to-do box, Alex, some publicity materials that students that are teachers can put up in the high schools, in the hallway or in their school building, to talk about the need for understanding children. That would help build our programs, I think, if we had some things like that, or some videos we could show, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, let's add that to the list. I do have to say, I don't think that there is a great understanding of all the career paths in early childhood there's early interventions specialists, home visitors, early educators. So we've been trying to kind of help articulate that these kind of courses on early childhood development are great, or even if you become a parent, just like Gayla said. Yeah. So thanks, Gayla. You've been a great partner and great resource, and I encourage anybody to reach out to Gayla if they need help.
Awesome. Well, and also to Alex and Shelby and the rest of our team, we sure appreciate having you with us today. Notice I've shared with you, I know you all have my contact information, but there's Alex's contact information here on the thank you slide. And does anybody have any questions or comments or anything that you feel like from me that you'd like me to work on? I have a couple ideas, but I just want to glean from you all what you might need. I'm going to end the slideshow now and ask you if there's anything in
questions for the group. Gayla, first, could you please share the slideshow this one that you presented? Will you share that with us? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then for Shelby and Jason, can I just know what was the early childhood center that was struggling with the zoning? Is that public knowledge? Is it a new one in Shelby?
There's a lot of them actually who've struggled there. We've helped some in Big Timber. Sometimes we're not successful. The new ones going up in Shelby, there are two. Neither of them are. All of my work and Shelby's work is confidential until it's not confidential, and so I would feel uncomfortable sharing with you
Gotcha.
the two that I'm referring to.
Okay, that's fair. I kind of thought that would be the answer. I was just curious because I mean, when it's discussed in public setting for permits and so on, if you went to the public record in Toole County for the most recent zoning commission meeting, you'd be able to figure it out. But yeah, they're still in what I would refer to as kind of mid-level planning stage, not quite ready for implementation yet.
I
Okay.
can add something from to answer that question. Here in Baker, we've had that problem. And it's been probably 5+ years ago, but we had a lot that was across from this elementary school, and it would have been a perfect location as far as transitioning from preschool over into the grade school setting. But the zoning ordinances wouldn't allow it. It was a residential zone, and so they couldn't put anything commercial in there. And it had enough square footage, and it was perfect. And then finally, they worked really hard to update the zoning. And the person that was going to buy the lot said, never mind, because they got frustrated with the process. But so we've had that here out in Eastern Montana. Our daycare and our Head Start program are working to get started, which is exciting. They're in another location, though, far on the other side of our lake, to get going. And then we had a windstorm the other day. They brought in a modular unit that they had built, and we had a bad weather that rolled one of the sides of the building over. And you're probably aware of this, Jason. I don't know if you've heard the story from Vaughn, but yeah, it's kind of sad, but they'll get it. They'll get it. They're still plowing forward, but the wind can also be a factor.
Yeah. Vaughn has been the best example of a resilient community lead and a resilient community that I can think of. There has been so many barriers to that project, but the thing is that happens to many projects, maybe not to the scale that's happening in Baker, but so many projects run into barriers like zoning, like location, like staffing, and then they just dissipate. And the thing is like to build resilient communities and resilient projects, you have to have that community ownership and this like sense of need that like regardless of barriers, we have to get this done. So we have to keep pushing through. So yeah, kudos to Baker and that whole team over there, because they have really, really just been digging their way through.
They're not giving up. That's the important thing.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions before we end for today?
One is, besides the example of Shepherd, what other school-sponsored early childhood programs exist in Montana? Is there a list that's been put together?
So, we do have a list, but we can't share it. There a lot of ton of schools, which have gone to 4-day school weeks. And this has caused many schools to think through offering some sort of childcare. So they've applied for licenses. I think at some point we'll be able to share the list. So stay tuned on that. But Jason and Shelby, if you have any like good examples that are public knowledge, that would be excellent.
The one that comes to mind, Roy is a similar sized community to Sunburst, I believe, that is working on this. I'm in Great Falls, so I'm doing my geographical step up to the Canadian border. Is it Power, Dutton, or Brady? There's one of them there that's a school-based one that I'm aware of. Shelby, do you?
Dutton, Brady.
Dutton, yeah.
Yeah, they have one that's been a long-standing program for a long time, and they have been really open with people who call and ask to like hear about their model and hear about their challenges and how they worked through things. So I would say that that's a good resource.
Another one, Shaylee, Reed Point is in that toolkit. There have been challenges with that one too. Reed Point was contracting with the only provider in Big Timber, and she was running that. Any partnership is extremely difficult. When there's two sides of an equation and everybody has their own expectations and desire for control. But Reed Point has gone through some changes, and I'm not actually even sure where they are now. Where they were contracting, and I believe they've decided, and I could be wrong here, that they are now, Reed Point School is now trying to do their own. And so there's some nuances there. And of course, it's a difficult business model. And even when you gather the right information and people say that they want something, words and deeds are different things. And so sometimes designing something and implementing something only to find out that what people said they wanted, they didn't want, is a challenge. So maybe those might be three. There might be more in central Montana. I would have to think a little bit more off the top of my head, but it's an emerging model for sure.
You know, and we have within that toolkit, you'll see that there are some case studies that are done on certain project types to highlight. And that's not to say that we're, I think, done doing case studies with our clientele. So the more that we work with these school districts and have tighter relationships with them, the more we want to shout out the really cool things that are happening in those areas. So keep updated with, you know, on our website. More of those will populate, I'm sure, as those programs develop.
I just thought of another one, Whitehall.
Mm.
And that's a collaboration partnership one, a public-private partnership.
So is Whitehall more like Dutton Brady that's in place, or is it more like the issues, the ones that are having struggles?
She's just now gotten operational here within the last, maybe since April, I want to say, is what's sticking in my mind.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, I hope this has been beneficial for FCS individuals who've attended and it's answered your questions. Obviously, we don't have a lot of questions, so I take that as a yes, you've got your questions answered. But the toolkit has been instrumental to this work. This is a profession that's very localized and it's very entrepreneurial in nature. So to have any sort of state or national collective conversation has been difficult because you're saying, well, here they do this and here they do that, and this state does this and this state does that. But to have Alex and her team 0 to 5 stepped up and said, hey, yeah, we need to do a toolkit. We'll take the lead. We'll draft some things and we'll send it out to our partners. And they were very open because I know several times I was really honest about, you know, we don't need a lot of background. We just need the how to do it, make it simple and be able to read it and then have an appendix or a link we can get more information. And that's scary when you're writing something and then you let someone, you know, look at it and offer some guidance. So kudos to you, Alex, for, you know, listening and putting this together. And I took notes myself as I went through to try to answer any questions I may have with FCS students moving or teachers moving forward. As FCS teachers, again, you don't have to be only doing this work if you're working on a school-based center, but it makes perfect sense if you are having a school-based center that you're right in the middle of it because you can bring such benefit to your students by being a part of this. I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest, about the toolkit for fear that schools who don't have an FCS person on staff might still try to do some things and have students that really are not mature enough or have the skill set necessary to be in place to be involved with little people. It's very nerve-wracking to think about the potential of things that could happen if you put students who have a default of what it means to provide care that's not aligned with the positivity and with the quality care parameters that we all know need to be in place. But it's a starting point. I think it's a good move for Montana. I'm very excited that FCS is going to be a part of this, and it may help us open and grow some programs. So that's, of course, always a thing that I like to see as well. Any last comments about anything or the process before we end? Because otherwise we'll give you back the rest of your time. Stephanie? Yeah, you're muted. There you go.
Not the button. Okay. So I think from our situation, we're not looking to start from scratch. There's already a pre-K program that has been associated with our K-1 school, but with the bond and the building adjustments, they're looking at realigning grade levels and moving second grade back to that building and fifth grade back to the other building. And so then there was this question of, will that program be displaced? and where should it land? And we are trying to gather good reasons for it to land at the high school so that our FCS program can expand into in that direction. And so that's kind of why Chris and I are here. She knows more, I think, about the actual program. I don't know if she does or not, but about the program that already caters to the little kids than I do. But I know that they've been talking about moving in, so I kind of jumped on board and said, hey, bring it up here because then I know that I can grow that side of that program for my students as well. So that's kind of why we're here. And I know we have another teacher who's also been interested in it. And so that's kind of why we're here. And so I don't know what that looks like in terms of the things that we've learned today. I know I'm interested in the FCS building, that classroom side of it, which I think are the next two, but how our model would fit in with what we were talking about today. Like, I feel like it's already part of the school. So I don't know, we're not necessarily building, and it's just a pre-K program. It's not down to the younger ages.
Well, and that's the thing with this type of work. It can be whatever your local options are and your local needs are. And there's not really one model. It's going to be whatever fits, but you can put pieces and parts of different ones. And that's why having Alex and Jason and Shelby is so important, because they're your go-to people to answer a lot of those questions. And involve me where it makes sense, but you don't need me to move forward, Stephanie, on your work. But very excited that we had this time together. Any other questions or last comments before we end our time together?
Gayla, as Stephanie was talking, 3 more programs or potential programs came to mind. I wanted to share with you, Shaylee. Great Falls Public Schools actually has one at Paris Gibson Education Center, their alternate high school. Anderson School in the Bozeman area has also been considering putting one across the street in an unused building. And Stevensville's got a school-based program that's depending on who you ask, good or bad for the community there, depending on who you ask. So those are 3 more examples since you were asking. And Gayla, I had one kind of additional question for you, that as you were talking about your FCS students having to participate in this program at a licensed center, I assume that you were referencing state licensed programs, but does that also apply to tribally licensed programs as well?
The licensing is linked with pre-apprenticeship. So if you're working with a pre-apprenticeship program, or you want your classroom students to be able to be accessing a pre-apprenticeship, then the work they do with littles needs to be in a licensed program. So it makes sense to have a licensed program if you're creating a new center, like in a school base, because then you're eligible for all of these other benefits. As far as tribal, that is something I am not going to talk about, because I know they have their own guidance through the tribal directors that we have through OPI. So that would be something that I would direct you to, Jason. So if you want an introduction to who that person might be, just send me an email and I'll share that with you so you can have that conversation. Because I know there are some tribal schools who are looking to do early childhood on the reservation. I've not been involved in those yet. That were just some general conversations. Hey, if we do this, would you be interested in being involved because of the high school and some of their child development coursework, excuse me. And I said, sure, but that's in the infancy as far as my involvement. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, someone said
I was
something.
just gonna say, I know Browning Public Schools had a pretty robust program. I think it's kind of got ebbed and flowed, but one cool thing that they did with theirs was they also built in some teen parent education classes within the center. So I thought that was really cool. So there's lots of cool things you can do. Anyways.
Yeah, and the state that I came from, the childcare program was started because of teen parenting. They wanted to keep, especially their young ladies who were parents in schools. So there's a whole parameter of in their one particular school district that I know is still running and has been since the 1970s, which then when this was first developed, requires the parents to be involved in this center and receive some other instruction in order to have their children, basically they're working, if you will, to pay for this free service that they have for childcare during the school day. So, but I also have connections with people in my last state that are willing to talk to schools and say, well, here's what we did, and this was the model we had, and here's what we learned from it. If anybody's interested in more of that, I can make those connections as well. So thank you so much. Okay, we have 2 minutes left, but I thank you very much. As FCS teachers, make sure one last time that you didn't already, make sure your name and your school is in the chat box. Those of you might be watching this as a recording, please send me an email with the top 3 things that you grasp from this. That indicates to me you did watch it, and then that will help me give you the verification for your PDUs that you would have earned. Thank you again, Alex, Jason, Shelby, all of you for being here. Have a great day. Appreciate you being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.